Pantheon ADC, an off-meta pick with great 2v2 in lane, high burst damage to kill squishies in one combo, a free roam tool that finally lets an AD carry make plays, and a new scaling build that completely changes how he plays. This is Dreadboss, a Pantheon main who reached Master Tier with AD carry, even having a 63% win rate to get there. I interviewed him to find out why this pick works, get some high elo Pantheon tips, and find out why he recommends it for climbing. And honestly, it's surprising how complex this pick can be. But first, this video is sponsored by something I'm legitimately passionate about: Ridge Wallet. I got one of these in December last year and I've used it for 12 months and I love it. So when they wanted to sponsor me again, I couldn't wait to recommend it to everyone. You can get one at ridge.com/chime with a huge discount of up to 40%. But why should you do it? Well, just like lots of people, I used to have a really bulky wallet that filled my whole pocket. Super annoying, way too big, full of stuff I don't need. But my Ridge Wallet is really compact, super light, easily fits into my pocket, but it still fits all of my cards and cash. I still feel really cool whenever I use it. Ridge also now have key cases, a compact way to store your keys. No more jangling noise in your pocket, or being stabbed by the sharp edges. And best of all their products have a lifetime warranty. I could honestly talk all day about why you should get one, but instead I'll just tell you I really recommend it. And at ridge.com/chime you can save up to 40% through to December 22nd. Link is in the description. Back to Dreadboss Pantheon, a veteran League player who started playing in Season 2. The first chapter of his League career was mechanics, becoming a Lee Sin main inspired by montages from the time. He loved practicing combos and outplaying people, but when he took it to ranked he had a problem: his toxicity. He never ever got any bans, he was just a bit angry at the game. It was more inner toxicity, and it held him back, stuck in Diamond 4 for years. His next chapter began in Season 6, Macro. Watching Dyrus play top lane, he loved seeing Singed, and how people could win games without even laning, so he swapped from playing with mechanics to winning games with only macro and decision making, even playing proxy Singed to avoid all interaction and annoy enemies as much as possible. With this playstyle he had success hitting Diamond 2, but it wasn't enough for him. With the Pantheon rework in Season 9, a new chapter began. New Pantheon was a lot less of a cheese pick than the old one, with more power in the rest of his kit taken away from his point and click Q. Mixing his old styles together, he picked a reasonably simple champion that still had some unique mechanics, but he was also now much better at macro, so he merged them together and started to climb. The only problem was, Pantheon had lost his identity as a top laner. Riot sort of accidentally removed him from that role, and didn't really know where to put him. He was being played support, but that wasn't his style. He wanted to be a carry, so Dreadboss decided to try mid lane, instantly having a lot more success. However, as he got higher rank, he realized how bad the matchups were getting. Things like control mages, such as Anivia, Syndra or Orianna. He could never really get close to any of them. The good mid laners will just space properly against you, and never let you touch them. So in Season 12, to avoid this and make his climb easier, he swapped fully to playing Pantheon AD carry. It sounds silly to swap lanes just because of some matchups, but that's not the only reason. First off, unlike mid laners, AD carries mostly don't have reliable CC, so Pantheon's W, the stun, which mages can cancel easily, AD carries struggle to cancel at all. Secondly, AD carry's range for the most part is about 550, Pantheon's W range is 600, so even the longer range AD carries can't auto him to poke without him having the option to jump onto them, stunning them and looking for a kill. That is, except for Caitlyn, which is who he bans every game. The other AD carries don't realize how much danger they're in when they're just laning normally. On top of this, in this new lane, Pantheon now has two different targets he can kill, with many supports having to position aggressively to do their jobs. It just gives him more options and more chances to use his early power to get a kill. And the biggest benefit of bot lane, his E. With this 180-degree wall that blocks all damage from one side, it's really hard for AD carries to ever get behind it and kill him, compared to mobile top and mid laners, who can dash behind his shield and keep doing damage. It's way too risky for an AD carry to ever dash through him, as they'll likely just quickly die instead. So in lane, whenever this ability is up, Pantheon is very safe. And importantly, he plays around this cooldown. With this AD carry style, Dreadboss hit Master with 186 LP and a 63% win rate, his most successful climb he'd ever had. And honestly, this style doesn't seem that difficult compared to how effective it is, even in lane, which is usually where Pantheon has to cheese to win games. Except with this new build, which includes Mana Moon, Pantheon AD carry is really a scaling pick that's happy to farm out and become a hypercarry later on. Really, this pick is all about matchups and which support he has. With an engage or damage support, his plan is to start Doran's Blade and go for a fight lane. He sets this up by letting the wave push into him, pretending he's unable to push it, and not hitting the minions too much. His goal is to slowly farm, keeping the wave near his tower, forcing the enemy to overextend, and W onto them as soon as he gets level 3. Due to how risky this lane is for the enemy AD carry, he should at least get a summoner spell if not a kill. Summoner spells are really the only thing that prevents Pantheon AD carry from being 100% win rate. If he can force enemies to use them, then he will get a kill. If the enemy uses flash early on, Pantheon can just wait for his W to come back up, and immediately he can probably get a kill. Same thing with cleanse, which isn't just good against Pantheon, it's a requirement against this pick. If enemies take it, then he forces them to use it as early as he can, backing off with his E to block the damage, and then trying to kill them when it's down. Or alternatively, if enemies forget to take it, then that's an easy 2 versus 2 kill lane. He also plays with Ignite Flash for the extra damage, but importantly make sure he doesn't stack his W and Ignite at the same time, because then the enemy could cleanse both of them. The other way Pantheon can lane is with a passive Enchanter support. Here his goal is different, buying Longsword 3-pot, and aiming to sustain through lane and scale without needing to fight. He asks his support to shove wave at level 1, and uses this wave push to keep warding the enemy tri-bush to help them track the enemy jungler. You can go for 2 versus 2s, but it's not necessary, because Pantheon bot lane scales harder than people think with this build. Luckily, Pantheon is not an easy champion to gank or dive due to his E, so unlike most scaling AD carries, he shouldn't be punished early on. As I mentioned, every time he goes for a trade, he makes sure his E is available. If it's up, he can go for a trade and then back off to stop the enemy's damage using it. If it's down, he waits patiently, as going in without it is really dangerous. Every 2 versus 2, he plays in a similar way, going for a big burst on one of the champions using all of his abilities, and then spacing to kite away from the enemy, as he wants to wait for his Q cooldown to come back up before he goes back in. He often doesn't waste time auto-attacking, instead trying to dodge the enemy's damage by creating distance, and then when his Q comes back up, he can go in again. This tap Q reduces the cooldown by 60%, and that's the difference between winning and losing a lane. At level 6, Pantheon becomes a more active pick, unlike most AD carries who are still stuck in bot lane. With his roaming ult, he can watch his jungler, and always ult over if he needs to help, instead of having to spend 20 seconds to leave his wave and walk to Rift Herald, or more likely just not even go. He can just walk a bit and ult up there as a gap closer, impacting the fight early on. Buying an early serrated Dirk, as well as going for cooldown boots and a tier, he's prepared to make some plays, and is also investing in his late game scaling as well. This build is not full lethality, it's really a DPS fighter that is able to kill a whole team if you leave it unattended, and people don't really expect this scaling from a Pantheon. Mid-game, your job as an AD carry is almost always to go mid and hold the tower. Pantheon does this a bit differently. Usually this is the most risky time of the game as an AD carry, as you're just about to get one item, meanwhile the enemy top and mid lane can pretty much kill you whenever they want. Pantheon is protected from dying due to his E damage block, and this keeps him safe. But the enemy AD carry is not so lucky. They can fall into this mid-game trap, which now also includes a Pantheon ult on top of them. Overall, Dreadboss has found that countering a play is always more effective than making one yourself. So instead of going for a risky engage into a group of enemies, he's looking to reinforce his teammates, turning a 1 versus 2 into an advantage fight and changing the outcome. One of the things that he does best that I haven't even seen in Challenger Pantheons is some shocking ultimate accuracy. One of the hardest skill shots in the game, since you have to predict it multiple seconds in advance and it's such a tiny circle, yet he does it so consistently, getting a 2-second slow and practically guaranteeing a kill. 5v5 is where Pantheon is usually worst, and it's where Dreadboss's Pantheon is most unique, especially because his team doesn't have an AD carry, so his champion has to completely change. The way he wins games without an AD carry is forcing fights around objectives. He doesn't want to do the objectives since his DPS isn't quite as high as a Marksman, but his fight power is just as good. However, Pantheon is usually known as a very simple diver, using his W to stun an enemy and hoping to kill them in one combo. However, Dreadboss says that his role is backline anti-dive. What does this mean? Pantheon plays with his mid or enchanter support, anyone who's an easy target for enemies to dive. When enemies go in, instead of engaging, he peels back and uses his full combo on the diver, slotting in his E to block any super important spells. By playing with his backline, flanks become useless for the enemy team. You're less likely to ever die in a fight since you're not playing aggressively, and your backline can really do their job. So picking this with a Hypercarry mid laner is great. He even buys Black Cleaver to buff up his team's damage, making him more healthy and harder for enemies to get through. Blocking important high damage abilities is also a big way he wins fights. If enemies have a really important burst burst spell that can kill you or a teammate. While he's fighting, he's waiting for them to use it, and saving his E until they do, as this can remove a part of the enemy team's fight power. And let's not forget, the later the game goes, lots of solo queue games end with one person getting caught out without their team. Luckily, Pantheon is an AD carry with a global, so he can always group with his teammates. Whether you're splitting to try and push a lane out, or even if you make a mistake, the ultimate will let you cover for it, ulting right in and turning the fight around. Here are his height yellow tips for Pantheon. Pantheon E blocks damage based on where the enemy champion is, not the ability. So even for an ability like Severe Boomerang, you need to use your E towards her to block the damage, even if the boomerang is behind you. Using empowered E occasionally to get the movement speed to chase down an enemy is a good option in some fights. You can also cancel your E early if you just want the damage to go off and fit it into a burst combo. The best champions bot lane to pick this with are things like Soraka, Senna and Taric, partially because they help you a lot in lane, but also because they're really good for synergy in fights. By now you might know my opinion on off-meta AD carries, which is that I think Marksman are just a bit of a waste of time in solo queue, and off-meta ones just give you a better impact. Pantheon AD carry is no exception, being such a safe as well as quite simple pick. Marksman champions in League are pretty much victims, meant to be killed for gold. Pantheon has a wall that blocks this, while still being a hypercarry level AD carry, and his team fighting style of denying enemies means that you won't beat this pig if you just play normally. For his AD carry build, which by the way has 0 armor pen since his ult gives it for free, up to 30% at level 16, meaning he melts tanks anyway, his mythic item is Eclipse, going for Black Cleaver into Mana Moon most games, as this is really efficient for the armor shred and the high AD. Blade, Edge of Night, Guardian Angel and Ghostblade are good options to finish off the build. Blade is especially good since Pantheon's empowered W applies the effect, so when you jump onto an enemy, they get stunned and immediately slowed, making it really easy for you to stay on top of them. His runes are mostly this Conqueror page, and he mentioned taking bone plating every game, as he thinks it's just OP for 2 vs 2 fights. Dreadboss has nothing to promote other than Pantheon, so thanks to him for the help and all the information for this video. And thanks again to Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this video. I really hope you give them a try and end up loving it as much as I do. Link in the description. Thanks so much for watching.